Hi, welcome back to part two of the Tony Drayton podcast. Part one is available elsewhere if you want to go look for it. And if you don't know who Tony is, I would say cultural commentator. Actually, I was thinking about that in our little break. Is a great way of putting it because you did Ripped and Torn fanzine, Gilly Pet Puppy fanzine, and also writing for various punk things and NME as well, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and is there anything I've left out there, incidentally, in the way you would like to be described?
And I think circus performer. I mean, is that thing because
Absolutely.
some people remember me from those
Yeah,
days.
yes, very, very true. So I'll put that in the description, circus performer, and indeed traveller, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You could
Okay,
say,
so
yeah, punk circus. The
yeah,
starter of punk circus.
okay.
Yeah,
So part two begins. Our duff duff moment in part one was you had finished doing Ripped and Torn, you've gone off travelling around Europe, and you have just come back to London and knocked on the door of a squat that was a fire station, and that's where we got to basically. But we also touched on the spirit, which will come into play certainly in issue 6 of Puppy, of course, where which is pretty
mm.
much about that. So what I'm trying to think about here as well, trying to work out with you, is whether there is a sort of spirit that is a common thread through all these things that you've done, and if so, what it is. So, yeah, so you've just come back to London. Ripped and Torn's gone. What year is it right
This is
now?
79.
1979.
1979.
Okay. Did the idea for a new fanzine kick off immediately?
Not at all. Not at all. Uh, what I'd done before I went is I'd spoken to Vermilion through Miles Copeland and Mark Perry and Step Forward Records, uh, and she was contributing to the last few Rips and Torns, and I let her take it over. I said, "Do you want to carry it on?" And she said yes. Uh, and I left it at that, thinking she would be able to make a proper go of it. Obviously, with the backing of Miles Copeland, all the step forward, all the people knew what they were doing, and she was a good writer. And so I thought, yeah, this is great. I'll come back and it'll be a big nationwide magazine by the time I get back. Um, I got back and she had done one episode, one issue 18, the Mystery 18. Ironically, with a big Genesis Peorage, great Genesis Peorage article, or written by himself. Yeah, article written by himself, which just tied up with me, getting away from Jen and how he was always in my life. Um, but she'd done that one episode, or episode issue, and done no more. I think it took how long it took me to find that out. We went back to Rough Trade and spoke to people at Rough Trade and said, "Oh yeah, Vermilion's not done any more than that. And what's happening, Tony?" Uh, but more excitingly, I say, as I say, I got back. We're talking about the spirit and free will, and do we make our own choices in life? And I went to the fire station. I had about £1 in my pocket, nowhere else to go, nothing to one suitcase, if that. Knocked on the door of the fire station where the hippies had gone. And we just kind of said, we're not going to move in here with you hippies. We're going to find our own life. And I knocked on the door, hoping they would let us in. And this girl answered the doors in a fishnet t-shirt, nothing underneath it, big blonde spiky hair, leather jacket. She says, "Oh, you're Tony. Come in." I was like, "Who are you? Why are you here? How do you know my name?" I went in, and my sister, who, when I'd gone to Europe, she was living in a South Kensington bedsit, working as a hairdresser. She was now living here. She was living in this building. Brett, who'd gone to France with me, Brett, Dave had gone to France with me, and Bob Short. They'd all moved in here. All the hippies had gone. The hippie dream had failed. Uh, this house, they'd formed a co-op, and they'd all pay money into this one person looking after all this money to do the place up, and the guy did a runner. The guy, cash from chaos. So he
Very good.
so he went. This I heard this afterwards. He went, then he did it again. They said did it again. And the same guy, next guy, the treasurer, did a runner with all the money. And
Right.
then this is all just in that summer. Uh, and then they all buggered off. All the hippies thought this is a disaster, and they all disappeared. And the punks moved in. Like, so people knew Bob, Brett, Dave from Covent Garden had moved in, and they just moved loads of, and suddenly all these punks, it became open house for punks. And then my sister then started going out with Brett. She moved in with him, and so they talked about me. This is how they, oh yeah, my Val's brother. I was known as Val's brother. Oh, you're Val's brother. Yeah, this is quite good because it was never like you're Tony D, ripped and torn. Ah, you're Val's brother. It kind of takes the pressure off a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we moved there, and then there's a weird thing with leafleting. I don't know how this fits into everything, but it's quite interesting. There's a job delivering leaflets. You had to go the tube way out to the back of Beyond, but there's a station you could walk along the tracks and climb over a fence rather than pay. And this leafleting job was on certain weird days, and a lot of people used to go. And I started doing it, going out on this train and climb over this fence, get down, go to this doorway, I suppose, and there'd be a van there, and you all pile in this van, drive you off somewhere, and you deliver leaflets through doors, and you come back and you got £6 for it, £6 in your hand. For some reason, that gave me a structure. That was what I needed.
Yeah.
A structure. I don't know if with Bill Drummond, go back to Bill Drummond we talked about in the first part. In one of his books, he talks about when he was arrested in Edinburgh for fly posting. And he actually was the KLF is his peak of KLF. And in court, he got found guilty. And the judge says there's no point in fining you. You know, it means nothing to you. So they said, I'm going to give you a community service. And he had to go out and stand on a roadside and 7 o'clock in the morning and be picked up by a van. They'd take him off and they'd dig ditches. They'd go off and dig ditches with all these other criminals, like a chain gang.
Gang, yes.
And he
Absolutely.
said it's the best time of his life. In his book, he says absolutely what he needed. Absolutely what he needed to get away from the KLF and showbiz and everything. He said actually loved it. He really looked forward to it. I really missed it when his community service was over. He missed it.
That ability to reframe situations, I think, is a common thread amongst people I would consider to be geniuses.
Yeah. But yeah, so I found that leafleting became that then like Bill's thing, yeah, just a routine that wasn't, you weren't in show business, you weren't Tony D, you weren't Ripped and Torn, you weren't even Val's brother. Yeah, that's number 6. You sit in seat 6, and here's your money. Sign up any random name you like at the end. You know,
Yeah.
Elvis Presley's name was down a lot in there, or Mr. Mouse.
Who knew that Elvis used to do all that work on the side?
If everyone goes through those sheets, those sign-on sheets, my God, look at this boss had everyone on it. Marilyn Monroe. Anyway, so the fire station, you have Val. I think what's happening then was that was probably the beginnings of Kill Your Pet Puppy, but we didn't know it then. I think it was the Scar stuff Madness had started playing, and it was getting really heavy with the right wing skinheads and everything. There was one skinhead lived at the squat, and he'd go and see these bands and say, "Don't come, you can't come to this, you know, it's too dangerous for you."
Right.
I suppose we loved it. We played it a lot in the Madness singles at the squat. So I'm just trying to cut this, well, trying to cut a bit short here, but one interesting thing about the Spirit is glue sniffing was huge. At this point, glue sniffing was huge. I'm like, fantastic to sniff glue in that time, in that environment. And one time we were all sitting around in this courtyard sniffing this glue. We were sharing, passing a bag around. I think how it worked, but yeah, I was sniffing this glue and I had this buzzing in my ear. It's buzzing, and I turned and said something. As this buzzing, and as I said it, the buzzing stopped. And Val, who was also in this circle, went, "Why did you say that?" And I said, I don't know. And she said, I've always had that in my head that you're going to turn and say this. Something like, that's all right, or something, that's all right. And she said
Mm.
she had it in her head. She'd had this image, this vision of me saying that to her. And when I said it to her, it was like, wow, it cleared something in her head. And for me, it's just cleared this buzzing in my ear. I think so. What was going on there, Gerard? What was going on there?
I've never heard glue presented as a mystical kind of.
But it created this vision, but she'd had this vision of me saying that
Yeah.
for a long time. But and there's no reason for me to say, but I had this buzzing, this whole buzzing in my ear thing that I had to turn around and clear it. And maybe something was going on there. So this is the things we talk about the spirit. We don't really know what's going on. We don't know there's a greater force that is marshalling us around, moving us around. And I was reading about Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, and in there that he describes the aliens, the Martians, as having an intelligence equivalent to the way we have an intelligence of ants.
Right.
He said that the way we look at ants is the way these Martians were looking at us on the Earth. Their intelligence and understanding was that much greater than us that we couldn't
H.G.
possibly.
Wells. Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Sorry, H.G. Wells, not Orson Welles.
H.G. Wells, yeah. Was I say Orson Welles?
I think you did.
Oh,
I don't
because
know.
he did the film, didn't he? No, no, he did the radio broadcast.
Ah, right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
And people thought it really was the end of the world and all that.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he created a whole thing. But I think from that was that writing, and maybe the H.G. writing about the intelligence makes you think, well, we're talking about the spirit. It's
Mm.
so beyond we can't comprehend what it's doing. Like the way an ant wouldn't understand what we were doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And the way, of course, that a lot of science used to be called magic until we understood it.
yeah, and science has been split to good science, bad science. We're not allowed to learn that stuff. It's got to be materialistic. It's got to be consumed. It's got to make things.
Oh, I
Enlightenment,
could
the
spend.
Enlightenment.
Yeah. I'm sure we could both spend a couple of hours talking about science and the way it's gone, really. And maybe one day we will. Who knows?
Maybe
But
we will. And you say when the witchcraft thing split, and some people were considered bad witches, some people were considered good, and scientists, and
mm,
doctors,
yeah,
same people, same. So they took all the wise woman stuff was bad science, and all the other stuff was good science. The stuff was good science. And that's another side of it.
yes, it is.
Another story. That's where it went wrong. Well, um, yeah. So we're saying this that time the glue thing was interesting because of an experience I couldn't understand. I still can't understand why, but it helped me understand spirit. And I think there's also actually a time around here. There's still a cult was all over the place around, even around this squad, even around the kind of the glue sniffers. And some punks had just come in. They weren't part of the original bit. They were fresh off the boat, if you like.
Yeah.
They still picked up on the Crowley stuff. That place was imbued with Crowley as well. I was thinking that I've heard people say, "Oh, why did you bring? Why did the punks get into all this magic stuff? Why is a design? We're talking about Genesis after this, we've got psychic TV after this, all that stuff. Or why did the punks do all this stuff? It's just like God. It's just like religion. And I think I was looking back at it, and even from the Frestonia days, magic's helped understand a lot of things like that little thing with my sister were going on a lot. There's a lot of weird coincidences, things that are happening, things being in the right place. Even like that girl answered the door and knowing my name.
Mm, mm,
There were things happening that was inexplicable in the normal way of thinking. So magic was actually helping us. There's another way of seeing the world, and so that is why it wasn't really we got to magic, but magic came into our world to help explain what was going on. And then the more you got to understood magic, you could actually use it. Like chaos magic, actually turn it on its head and actually start using. That's what's happening. Now I can make that happen.
mm.
I can make that happen now. It's all outside of reality, outside of mundane world. So
Well,
it's another.
perhaps that really is an important point to pick up on. Was there was something that wasn't mundane about it, which may explain perhaps why magic is the direction people went in, rather than say more straightforward Jungian psychology or something like that, or more acceptable, more mainstream stuff like.
Yeah, there was also sexy.
Yeah, that's what I mean, really. I guess that's a better way of putting it. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Carl. Sorry, Carl. Going.
Yeah. So you said that while we had our little break, you said that the presence of the Atlantis bookshop was also a part of what drew you to that kind of area, or part of the attraction of that area.
Yeah, I was thinking back, and I said that I'd found Atlantis once I moved to Covent Garden. But I just realised that it's actually before that, when I was at the squat at Frestonia, um, I'd had an experience, and I was doing automatic writing at the time. I started to do automatic writing, a combination of speed, hunger, lack of sleep was taking me out to weird, and obviously these things we're talking about, weird things happening. There's a lot of weirdness. I was doing automatic writing, and I used to sometimes be all night writing a page after page, these kind of swirling curly cues with my hands just going crazy. And at one point, I've probably been up for 3 days at this point, and I was driven out, and this hand, I was letting my hands rule me. And I went out, let this hand take me, guide me around the street. So it's now going to take me out. Put the pen down, and my hand is now possessed, and it's going to take me. And we went to a phone box, went into a phone box, and the hand opened a yellow page. In those days, you had the yellow pages in the phone box.
Right, yeah.
And he flicked through it, and it went to down a page and found a name. And I phoned that number. They didn't answer.
Ah.
I always wonder what would have happened if they answered it, but then they didn't answer. Then it took me, guided me onto the tube, all the way to the bookshop, Atlantis bookshop, which I didn't know existed. So was that, and saying, oh, it's just in my imagination, but it took me to a place that had stuff that I was looking for, this magical stuff. That is inexplicable. That I never in that part of London before. And it just took me out of the tube, down the street, up the street, and then wow. That is quite startling to me. Again, you can't say, oh, it's just thought it up. And then I think I was saying that was a few months after that I moved into Covent Garden, whether that was unconsciously to be nearer that bookshop, or being drawn to people who had that kind of feeling. That's why this person spoke to me at the gig and took me back to their place, because they kind of saw that in me, that maybe their spirit was moving within all of us. But I actually wrote a 9-page piece about that, which I sent to somebody, or letter, just a letter to somebody. I wrote it, and I stuck some pictures of the automatic writing on it, and they went and printed it. In Liverpool, they made a little fanzine of it.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it's still
You got
around.
a copy of that?
I think I have. Yeah, I know you're going to ask that question.
Yeah.
I could try, and yeah. I sometimes when he first did it, and he sent it over to me, and all the nice cover, and I thought, oh, for God's sake, this is meant like a private writing to you. But afterwards, years later, I think, it's actually really is a great document. I can try and get it over to you if you like.
I'd be fascinated. Maybe I could
Yeah,
put it up on the website underneath this video.
yeah.
That would be quite interesting for me, certainly, and for other people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
So that
have you met Alistair Livingston by this point?
not by this point, no. This is still to come.
Let's leave him till he appears then.
Yeah, leave him to appears. So we've got Bob Short coming to the picture. He became
Yes.
very important. He'd sort of come into that squat at James Street. One of the things when we were being arrested, so opening the big building by the British Museum, Bob had actually gone out. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, the four of us had stayed in the building overnight, and Bob went out on some spurious thing, some spurious idea. And it's after he went that the police came and said, it's only me, Brett, and Dave got arrested. And Bob then said he thought he had a premonition. Told us afterwards he had a premonition that this is going to happen. That's why he went. But he said he couldn't tell us, or it would stop him saving himself.
Right.
He had this kind of vision. He had to get out. He had to get out, and don't tell anyone. So there's another. But so he was at the the fire station squad. He was becoming quite a big figure then. He hadn't formed Blood and Roses yet at that point, but he was beginning to. He was beginning to start to get to band again. He was a guitarist. He'd put the hard hours in to learn how to play guitar and stuff. So he had all that in his baggage. So when he wanted to create, he had the ability to do it. And Dave Sexgang was there, but he hadn't sparked it off yet. He wasn't creative at that point. I think I had to jump ahead. So I say this madness and stuff were happening in London. There's the big thing was the ska revival and the heavy duty British movement was coming up then. They actually had their headquarters just down the road from us. We had to go past it to get to Old Street Tube Station.
Jesus.
And often you'd come out the station at Old Street and there'd be skinheads going to their place and us going to our place. And it came to a head when they tried to attack us. They tried to assault. There's a big skinhead attack on the fire station, which had been brewing, also because we'd been past each other. They knew we were there. And eventually we moved out. I'm just trying to cut a long story short. It's a great story of this place, but to cut a long story short, we went off in two different directions. Bob and his crew went to squat a hospital. They'd found a hospital. There's one thing when you're doing this kind of squatting, you're always looking for the next place.
Yeah.
Always in your head, you're looking for the next place. So and somehow they'd found this hospital way out near Willesden. Another back to Sandy and Alex's first place near Willesden, all links together. But there's a place out there, some old hospital, St. Mary's, and they were planning. How do people do this? But they were planning to move there. They'd found this place and they were planning to move into it. And we were saying, well, we're not going with Bob's crowd. Don't want to go with Bob's crowd. So it's the same when we left the Covent Garden squat. No, we're not going with the hippies to the fire station. We're going to do our own thing. We finished up at the fire station. This time we're going to do our own thing. We found a church, an abandoned church nearby. And we're going to squat in the church. You go to the hospital, we'll go to the church. And so that's what happened. They went, Bob and his crew, including this girl with a t-shirt, they all went off to the hospital. We went to the church and we were evicted from the church within about a week. Dave Sexgang, bless his socks, opened the door, never opened the door. He opened the door someone banged on the door of this church, opened the door, and these people came in and said, we're evicting you. You've let us in. If you don't let them in, they can't evict you. They came in. He was there by himself. He'd say, I was by myself. But they came in and evicted us. And they said they were from a travel agent around the corner. So we went around me and Val went to this travel agent and said, what, this place is empty. Why are you evicting us? He said, we didn't know that was going to happen so quick. And there's like a pile of brochures. One room had a cardboard box with some travel brochures in it. They said, yeah, we rented it for storage. We rented the church off for storage. We heard there's a load of punks in there. And so we contacted the bailiffs or contacted somebody, and they said, we didn't realize they were going to come in straight away. And I said, well, let us live there. We'll pay you rent. We'll live there. And they said, no, it's too late now. Weirdness. But this got so polite, and the travel agent, so polite. Is that saying if you'd asked us in the first, we didn't know. We don't know you were in the place, mate. Anyway, we were out in our ear. And where did we go? Bob's hospital. Same story again. The fire station. We didn't want to go to the fire station, but we finished up there. Didn't want to go to the hospital. Finished up at the hospital. At this point, still not doing Ripped and Torn. Still not doing no follow up to Ripped and Torn. People still ask me. I'd go to Rough Trade, and they'd always say to get mail because mail was still coming into there, and I was using that as my address anyway, the shop. And they said, why are you going to do a Ripped and Torn? Why are you doing a Ripped and Torn? The Vermilions mucked it up. God, you need something, Tony. And I said, I'm not quite in the position to do it yet. I go back and sniff some more glue.
Yeah.
And the hospital was Glue Central. We would say it was Glue Central. They'd actually gone. And Bob and his crowd said we could stay in the garden. They wouldn't let us into the building. We'd only be allowed to stay in the garden.
Okay.
And Bob's written about this hospital since, and
Mm.
it sounds like he did us a favor. It's haunted, possessed, and people there had bad energy, the glue energy. Well, it was picking up. This hospital was meant for people who went there to die. And it wasn't a hospital as such as a place. The last gasp saloon for terminally ill people would go there. It was come out in hearses. So you had this incredibly bad atmosphere
Mm.
in there. But anyway, we were in the garden. Bob was in Bob was in there with his goblins, and so I think had to not spend too much time on this. But me, Val, and Brett would walk the streets of would walk down to as far as Kilburn, trying to find somewhere to live, trying to find a squat. We're obviously living in this garden, and we went past a street. And we saw a guy on the top floor with red leather trousers on. And I thought, okay, rang the bell. You might know. Rang the bell, and it was Kevin Mooney. Kevin Mooney, and he was living at his West Hampstead Housing Co-op. He said, "Oh, this is a West Hampstead Housing Co-op." Because we said, "Oh, are you squatting?" Rang the bell. "Are you squatting here? There's a space." He said, "No, but it's a housing co-op, but there's an empty flat on the first floor." It wasn't empty for long. Well, we moved in, and they gave us a key. They gave us a key to the front door, the main door. We went into this room. And it was about 8 of us moved into this little small flat, like Val, Brett. Then Lee was with us, Lee from Last Words, who then, for some reason, invited his singer. The singer of the Last Words turned up with his girlfriend in London from Australia. And Lee said, "Oh yeah, come and see us when you come to Australia." Turned up with their bags. And we said, "Well, there's 5 of us in here, but we make it 7. Why not? Squash in, all sleeping on this floor. A bit like Rev
In
Alting's
one
house
room.
in one room. No toilet. The water didn't work. The toilet didn't work. We had to go. There's a pub nearby. Became the railway hotel, the Moonlight.
Mm.
Was about 50 yards away. That was our toilet, our heating, and our sustenance. Strangely, we moved there. There was a leafleting job. We found out, someone told us, maybe Kevin told us, that along the road there's another place. You went there and you got picked up in the morning, and they'd take you out and do leafleting, give you £6, £6.50 if you had the map, 50p if you had the map and a highlighter, and you'd mark off the streets. If you're just the other guy, you got £6.
Was there an Ants connection here? And I know this is before Kevin was in Adam and the Ants, but you were a massive champion of them very early on.
Hmm.
He was presumably in their circles to be asked to play bass for
I'll
them.
tell you how close he was. Eve, Adam's wife, was living there, and she got on really well with Val.
Right.
Can you imagine that? Oh, yeah, who are you, Eve? Yeah, Eve, and then she's, "Oh yeah, I'm Adam's wife. Adam, do you know Adam Ant? Yeah, I heard of him. I'm his wife."
So that's a completely random thing.
Random, absolutely random. Only because he had red leather trousers. Though he's now said, because Richard's asked him, I've told this story, and he's started because Richard's still in contact with Kevin Mooney, who lives in Berlin, and he said, "I've never had red leather trousers. It may have been this other guy who lived there, but I call it the Kevin Mooney story because otherwise it's a random guy." But
So,
Kevin Mooney was living there,
yeah, yeah.
and he managed to get himself banned from the railway, from the pub,
Oh dear.
whilst we were there. So that's a weird. Yeah, I've been writing about the ants in the Ripped and Torn. Obviously, did
Mm.
the first ever ants interview. Uh, I think maybe they knew about, maybe Kevin knew about Ripped and Torn. I can't really remember now. Saying who we were. But yeah, definitely unconscious ants. Again, the unconscious forces driving us together. That how did we finish up with Adam's bloody wife and
Mm.
Kevin Mooney, who wasn't even the ants?
It's quite interesting to talk about the Ants for a second. Also about Adamant, actually, more specifically, I suppose. That everybody else seems to kind of connect up in this sort of spider's web that you've mentioned, Genesis Peerage, Penny Rambar,
Mm.
and Mark Perry and you and all these kind of dudes. But Adamant never seems to be a part of any of that.
He kind of was with Jordan, the very early days, and Jordan was the link to Sex and Malcolm. And of
Mm.
course, remember he went in with Malcolm. Malcolm took over the ants and then formed Bow Wow Wow. So there's kind of a link there. I think Matthew Ashman came out of our house once. Whether I was doing an ants interview. I'll just jump ahead a little bit now, because we're in that squat, the one bedroom flat with all of us on the floor, and it was then. I'll do the whole story of this one. I was still going to rough trade. We were getting the leaflet money, the £6 a day leaflet money, which was then spending half it in the railway, £2 about 50p or whatever it was. But anyway, there's enough money to go straight to railway and have a piss and a pint, and stay there till closing time. But then I was going to rough trade still, and being always asked the question, when you're doing another issue. Then Jolly was in rough trade, Jolly of Better Badges, and he said the same question. He said, he said, you look like you need a meal. I said, not wrong there. So they took me to the Mountain Grill Cafe, which is on Portobello Road.
And the title of a Hawkwind album.
Title of a Hawkwind album. So all links together, of course. In fact, it's actually still there. It was still there at that time in '79. Bought me a meal, and he said, I'm thinking of going to printing fanzines. And he said, I'll do a new fanzine. If you do a fanzine, I'll print it for you. And I said, well, it's great, Johnny. It's great for the offer, but I haven't got any money. And he said, what I'll do, you just buy the copies off me, I'll print it, and you can buy the copies you want. What you think you'll sell, you can buy off me and then go and sell them. As many, as little as you want. He said, but what I want to do, I want to sell them myself. He said, I'll print them up and I'll sell them on my badge store, and you can buy whatever you want off me. I said, sounds fantastic. Sounds fantastic. And on the way back from that discussion, I'd seen a typewriter in a second-hand shop between the leafleting place and the house, and I'd always walked past it. And this time I came out the station, I went and bought that typewriter. £6. I bought that typewriter. Brought it into this one-bedroom flat, brandished it, and said, "We're doing a fanzine. It's going to be called Fuck Your Mother." Do you remember that story?
I do remember that story.
Yeah, we had just somewhere else, and it's still on the YouTube somewhere about the Fuck Your Mother.
Oh God, yes, we did it outside the Prince Albert in Brighton.
Yeah,
still coming back. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So why didn't you call it that in the end?
I phoned Andy Palmer. I phoned Crass from a public phone box to see if I could do an interview with them, put them in the fanzine. So I phoned Andy Palmer, answered it, and I said, I'm doing this fanzine. Tony from Ripton told me, where have you been? And I said, I'm going to do a new fanzine. It's going to be called Fuck Your Mother. He said, don't call it that. I think you're right. You're right, Andy. It's stupid.
So the band that was almost called Stormtrooper, of course. Yeah.
So I went back to the house and said, it's not called Fuck Your Mother, but what's it going to be called? And someone, I say it's foul, said Kill Your Pet Puppy. So it's got to be like that. You're something. And it's got to allude to Fuck Your Mother. So we know that's the real title, but this is a light version. And
light given the title it became, which, as you know, I'm not mad keen on. That's
but I think it's Val says Kill Your Pet. She says it wasn't her, but I think we were all of us sitting around this room.
Yeah,
I'm sure she said Kill Your Pet Puppy, and Brett went and drew what became the logo, the hairy words.
Scissors. Oh no, okay, the words, right?
Yeah, and the scissors. Yeah, the Mandy, the picture of the girl. He did both. So he did both.
There's an element of the Beano or the Dandy in that hairy writing.
There is, isn't there? It's remarkable. Again, how did that? He just sat there. You've got the words "Kill Your Pet." It's called "Kill Your Pet Puppy," and he just almost immediately took a pen and a bit of paper and just drew this. And the fact that it goes off, it's not one straight line. It's like "Kill Your Pet" and "Puppy's underneath." Just so aesthetically unpleasing for the design for the designer. It's kind of deliberately wrong. And
then he
vanished off the face of the earth. He just doesn't want to be known.
it's really weird when that happens, particularly in the internet age, isn't it? The digitally
Yeah,
disappeared, basically.
yeah. It's quite hard to disappear yourself. Quite hard not to be around.
Yeah, yeah.
Even people like Val, who you think would diligently track people down, but she's not managed it. But anyway, so that's yes. We had this something. We had a name. We had a name. Now we had a logo. We had to carry on, and that issue then that became just to cut a long story short. It's all handwritten, I think. Well, no, there's some typing. Yeah, because I bought the typewriter. Anyway, we got it to Jolly. Adam said he'd do the cover. I somehow got in touch with Adam, and he said he'll do the cover. And it was dragging on, dragging on. I got everything to Jolly. Jolly printed everything up apart from the cover. Adam hadn't brought the picture. Hadn't got the picture over. I do it because I'd gone to Do It Records and they'd given us the picture we'd used for the ants piece. But anyway, I remember, yeah, Jolly saying that Adam, eventually I had to say to Adam, take it straight to Better Badges, straight to 281 Portobello Road. You know, and I'd done the cover, so if it wasn't a picture, it was still a cover. It's the black and red kind of looks. It would have worked without a picture because Adam was getting so late, and eventually he's like, take it straight to the printer, and he did. He took it there, and Jolly's saying he read the piece that slags the ants off. So he says, Adam's there, he's reading this. What the fuck, Tony, you fucking bastard. And he almost took his picture back.
Was that the Dirk review or something like that?
It wasn't a review as such as well about how the ants gone downhill. They were in a sitting. Someone told me they were sitting in a cinema screen on the green watching Jubilee, and so there's a whole with quite a good written piece, I think. That's kind of how the ants are sold out. Whether they're sold out, or I can't remember. I have to go back and read it. I haven't read it for years. But it's uncomplimentary, just to put it that way, uncomplimentary. You had the ants crass tunal thing. I think slagged off the ants, slagged off crass, and slagged off tunal. It's like fucking get your act together, punks. I'm back. I'm back, and I'm back, and I hate the lot of you.
I'm glad you got anybody else to be in it after that. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that's how the fanzine started again. How Kill Your Pet Puppy started. I think there was a reasoning behind Fuck Your Mother and Kill Your Pet Puppy was not to be popular. So I thought, if I want to be popular and mainstream, I got to keep on Ripped and Torn. Because I didn't keep on Ripped and Torn. This is going to deliberate affront.
What was wrong with being popular or mainstream? And obviously the two things being different as well.
I was snotty, a misguided idiot. Or idealist. Not saying I thought the world was going to change. I thought we were going to win. I thought we were going to win. So,
and that drags us back to spirit because, the future was undecided. And of course, not only this conversation, but all the kind of academic books, or any books for that matter, that are just kind of delving into punk and so on. They're doing it after the fact in such a way that they know what happened next. But of course, we didn't.
No, we still thought we were going to win. Still thought it was going to change. We were going to change the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And so everything was temporary.
That's definitely something I shared with you at the time. This feeling of we were, or certainly that we needed to change the world. I think. But how many people do you think shared that vision in the punk world, in the counterculture world, and how many people do you think, well, didn't?
Hard to say. I think people I knew, obviously anyone creative, I think we're doing this. There's a purpose to this. Certainly the crass crowd, the anarcho-punk feeling was someone's got to change, and we're going to change it. We're the ones to change it, and it is going to change. Otherwise, what's the point of doing this? Obviously, there's a lot of people just like the music. You know, there's a whole wave of people just liking the music. Whether I interacted with them, hard to say. If I did, I don't know. I probably don't remember. People says, "Oh yeah, I like that. I like that song." It's not the song; it's the lifestyle. You can't take the single out of the packaging.
Do you think? I've completely lost my train of thought there. You never get that on the one show, do you? Um, how was the reaction to Clear Pet Puppy? That's what I was going to say. How when it came out, what kind of feedback did you get? Because it was pretty different to Ripped and Torn. Ripped and Torn was quite straight compared to Puppy, really, wasn't
It
it?
was, yeah, and I think that was what I was aiming for. Um, well, when we got it together, Adam got his picture in to Jolly, and he printed them up. And he had 500. He said, "Well, we're going to sell these." And we're aiming for the Ants end of year gig at the Electric Ballroom, and even the date is 1979-80. That's the end
Mm.
of 79. And he managed to get them all printed up, stapled, and he had them on sale. They had 500 copies on sale, and he sold a lot. I remember that he sold a lot because he went to the end of the night. Someone wants to get a copy. I didn't have a copy, and he says they've all gone. So they sort of it's Ants Tunal Crass. They said that's what people thought it was called, Ants Tunal Crass. It's written on the bottom, Ants Tunal Crass. Kill your pet what? No, Ants Tunal Crass, mate. Here you are. It's your
Uh,
Ants Tunal Crass.
those years in marketing or in advertising, I should say, weren't wasted.
Again, getting it wrong is perfect for that. The whole offset design atrocity.
Was there an element of controversy with anybody? I mean, not major controversy, obviously, but the fact that culturally it probably owed more to Oz than Sniffing Glue.
Yeah, we didn't have that. I had people from Animal Liberation coming up to me at gigs saying, "Oh, we shouldn't kill it. It's harmful. You're promoting harming animals." But Swift punch to the face sorts them out.
Shocking.
No, I was saying that's when I had the whole. I think it's even the first sort of page, inside page, which says, "This is not about puppies. This is about a metaphysical thing."
At the time,
symbolism.
that seemed obvious.
Yeah,
It almost seems less obvious now, which is
it
quite
does.
curious.
It does because people just take the image, don't take the context. That obviously we weren't killing puppies.
I never ever questioned that name until it came to the website of the same name, and we had
Yeah,
discussions about that back then,
yeah,
didn't we? And yeah, it's funny how context can change something so completely in that respect. For me,
yeah,
at least.
yeah.
However, that's it's
I,
another.
th I think we had more trouble with the second issue when there's no interviews at all. People were trying to sell it, Jolly and Rough Trade saying you can't. There's no tagline. There's no Ants Tunal Crass. There's nothing like that to sell it. And there's a picture's not a band on the cover and all that. But then Jolly said afterwards, years later, he said, is our bestseller. And
Really
it's one I used to show. I used to use as an example of what a fanzine should be like.
brilliant.
He thinks number 2 is the best one ever. I also think that. But at that point, by number 1, so to go back to my life story, number 1 was done in that little room. Then Eve, Kevin, and the others moved out of the West Hampstead Housing Co-op flat above, which is a much bigger place, a nice bigger place. They moved out and gave us the key. Thank you very much. So we all moved. First of all, we just used it for the toilet. We're going back in our little hovel and go up and use the toilet upstairs. Oh, dream flushing toilet, man. Look at this. It's the future. And then we decided to not come downstairs again and just move into it.
Yeah,
And then we went to West Hampstead Housing Co-op and said, we want to be your tenants. And they said, well, why? I said, we're living in one of your places, Sheriff Road. And they said, okay. So rather than go through the hassle of kicking us out, they said, just stick us on. And we'd gone, and the hospital at this point was falling to pieces with Bob's Hospital. We'd left all that behind.
mm.
And we'd suddenly finished up as housing association tenants. Out of nothing, out just walking the streets. And that is where we did number 2. We did not issue number 2 in that place. And so Matthew asked about the Ants connection. At one point, Mark Moore, S Express.
Yes.
He lived down the road. Young
Okay.
chap, young schoolboy at the time. And he came around. He used to love. He came around with him in the 1-bedroom flat. He used to come around. And he had Ants bootlegs. He brought these Ants bootlegs around for sort of cassettes. That's a
Brilliant.
connection.
I remember
Then
Adaman. Sorry, I remember Adaman in some interview saying, I think he was asked what fanzines he liked or whatever, and he said he really liked Ripped and Torn, but he wasn't so keen on the puppy fanzine because you'd gone political,
yeah.
which brings us on to kind of anarchism and the sort of what you might call the attempts to put anarchism into action, like
Mhm.
Wapping Anarchy Centre or Autonomy Centre, whatever they called it, and just sort of politics in general, really. I think.
Okay, but you're going to jumping ahead, but I'll touch those bridges.
All right, jump
Um,
away.
okay, because we moved upstairs, the big place, got the housing association tenancy. We've done number 2 up there, done issue number 2.
Mm.
And Matthew Ashman, to go back to announce all his forces, Matthew Ashman came round and dyed his hair. No, he'd come round and my sister was dyeing her hair. And he used the toilet while she was rinsing her hair out in the bath in the same bathroom. Startling. But I can't remember why he was there, whether we did an interview with him. He says going back with the ants. He hated Adam, but he was going to go back with the ants on tour. Adam had asked him to go on tour. Why was this an interview? I'd said because it was never published. But he was there and he did all this whole story, but he's going to take lots of books and just read these books on tour. How did that happen? Why did that happen? I don't really think how all that happened, but I remember that as a major thing. Val dyeing her hair, washing her hair, she's just trying to look at his dick while he's on the toilet. I'm sure she'll
Fantastic.
deny it now.
I'm sure she'll thank you for saying that. Yeah.
But we got no reports back from our field reporter.
There's no marks out of 10. Okay.
But anyways, that's just an interesting weird things that happened. Like we had Eve lived there and Kevin Mooney and then Matthew, Mark Moore with his ants bootleg. So you can't escape the ants, and Crass we'd gone to Dial House. I'd taken Lee to Dial House to do the interview. We did that piece, yeah. Yeah, we slagged him off. There's a little piece slagged him off. Procrastination.
Mm.
In number 1, that was Lee, who was very hardcore Bakuninist, Deruti, anarchist, old
Yeah.
school anarchist, but as a punk rocker from Australia in a band. So and then they'd written a response. Penny had written his response to it, which we published in number 2. So what happened? Then I went back to Paris from there. Went back to Paris. Crass's Bloody Revolutions was coming out. I think this is key about Alistair and Anarchy in Action. It's all going to kick off in a minute. It's all going to kick
Yes.
off in a minute.
I can feel the tension rising.
I went back to Paris, found out that my girlfriend there, I'd made her pregnant, and she'd had an abortion.
Okay.
What a thing! What a shocker!
What was your
I was like,
reaction
"What
to
did?"
that? Because it's a weird thing for a bloke that sometimes, isn't it?
I'll tell you, she was pregnant again with somebody else, and she was going to another abortion. And I remember sitting on the metro with this guy who'd impregnated the second time. We were looking at each other. What a life! How do you even process that?
Well, quite.
I took her to the
How many
abortion.
emotions are coming at you at
Yeah.
once?
Well, I took her to the abortion clinic for the second one, for not my kid, but for this other kid. And so I was kind of there by proxy. I was sort of sympathizing by proxy. I was there. I'd done through the whole thing with her, but not through mine, but for another one.
Bet you're glad you didn't have to explain that to the abortion. Weird. Okay.
I know. Are you the father? No.
No, I
Wrong
was
for
previous.
Levant.
Blimey. So yes.
So I came back with all that going on in my head, and we got evicted from Sheriff Road. West Hampstead Housing Co-op said we want the house back, but they gave us another house. That was Puppy Mansions 1. That became Mansions 1. Then when I came, it's almost as like when I came back, they'd moved. I said the shift had happened so quickly that I came back and I was there now in West Bear Road, Puppy Mansions 2. Luckily, I'd got a room, the smallest room in the place. I didn't get my pickings. I got a small little box room. But at least they moved my stuff for me. So that's about shock after shock. I think when we because then right, no, number 2. Actually, to go back, number 2 had Alistair's first writings in it. So we'd moved to the West Hampstead Housing Co-op. So how to fit all these things happened so quickly.
Mm.
We'd gone to the Persons Unknown meeting at Conway Hall when they'd come out.
Let me tell everyone what persons unknown was? Because that's I think that's quite an important part of this, actually.
Right. Persons
I can,
unknown. You're going to tell.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, you tell them. You tell them, Gerald.
Okay, so persons unknown was basically the police arrested a load of what you might call more traditional anarchists, uh, by which I mean people who weren't, Crass fans or part of the anarchist punk thing, and they were arrested for conspiring to blow up places unknown, conspiring with persons unknown at dates unknown or whatever. And so an anarchist support group grew up to support these people. And I believe that you met Alistair at one of these support meetings. Is that
This is right, but this is when they were acquitted. I think they were acquitted or they were out, because they're all there. Um, and there was something. I think the support group had raised a lot of money to support them, which they then didn't need. They had a lot of money, funds, and it was like, what we're going to do with these funds? And they said they were talking about creating an anarchy centre in Wapping because it was next to Big A, Little A, where they
the
worked.
printers, yes.
The printers were next door.
Right.
So, but these meetings at Conway Hall was going there to sort of talk about what this vision of an anarchy centre, what was going to be in it. And then we met Alistair at this meeting. And it was like me, Val, and Brett. And we had copies of. So this confuses me. I thought we had copies of Ripped and Torn 2, Puppy 2, but we didn't because he was in it. Maybe we had Puppy 1 with us.
That's why we need to be talking about this now before we get too old.
Yeah. See, I always think I always had the bag. I always had a plastic bag full of fanzines. Even though I went to the local shop, so I'd always have I'd always have a bag of fanzines ready to sell them. So anyway, somehow we got talking. We sat around in a pub afterwards, and Alistair had his magical vision speech, and he had he written? He wrote to us this whole big spiel, 5-6 page letter, and I think then I published it, and he then started coming around to West Bear Road Puppy Mansions 2 because he never came to number 1. He came to 2. So maybe I published his letter, and then by the time I came back from France, he was then becoming a regular visitor. But number 3, this is where it kind of falls apart. Everything falls apart again, where I got itchy feet, and I'd realised I'd done my little Paris, Belgium, Amsterdam trip, and I looked on the map. I thought it's nothing. It's a mere smudge on the map of the world. I want to go further. I should go further, and so I decided to go abroad and see how long I could last. And in May, possibly May 1980, we've done 3. We're working on 3. Everyone, and I was trying to get the fact that everyone was together. I was trying. This fanzine wasn't Tony D's fanzine. It was the Poppy Collective, which called themselves the Poppy Collective. They could all do it, and it'd be great if it was done while I wasn't there. And it was all in operation. I got Brett introduced to Jolly, and this is how we were going to do it. This is what's going to happen. And I went away, and to cut a long story short, I came back in November. Away for about 6 months. A huge journey around Europe. Came back in November 80 or October 80, September, that kind of time. And there's still piles of written articles and drawings all over the place, but they hadn't put them together. They hadn't printed it, let alone printed it or sold it. So I came back, and within a week, I brought all the stuff they had together. There's a big Honeybane interview, slagging her off about 5 pages. I cut it down to half a page. There's a Bauhaus interview, which is like they came from Northampton in white trainers. This is Brett slagging just slagging off all these people we liked. Again, keeping up the tradition. And when we pulled all these things together, and me and Brett went to Jolly, and then Brett was saying, well, printed like this and these colours, and so number 3 is incredibly colourful, but not the anarchic kind of colouring of number 1 or 2. This kind of Brett's colouring, Brett's things. Anyway, so I came back, and so number 3 hadn't been out. There's a huge gap because number 3 hadn't come out whilst I was away. Came back, we did this number 3, got that out, and it's a real struggle because it's not what I expected to be doing. I expected it to have had its own life, its own legs. But put that together. And then number 4, then Alistair was coming around a lot. I'm talking about number 4. We did at Big A Little A. We printed at Big A Little A.
Oh yeah.
I think Jolly wasn't going to do them anymore after that number 3. He didn't want to do us, or whatever happened. Maybe he couldn't do folder. I don't know what it was. Anyway, we went somehow with Big A Little A number 4. But at this point, 1980, that winter, the Anarchy Centre opened in Wapping, and it was a disaster, financial disaster, until Andy Martin of the Apostles went around and persuaded them, who worked at Big A Little A. He went and persuaded the anarchists to have bands, let him put bands on to get some money in, and that was the beginnings of a whole new adventure when you're talking about anarchy into action. This was Andy Martin kick-started it, and we very quickly got involved. I'm trying to think how we started running the bar. There's no drink. I think when we'd go to Wapping, there's no alcohol, nothing, no alcohol, no food, no nothing. Andy was good about the bands. He knew bands, he could get bands in, but didn't know anything about running gigs or venues. And it was quite dangerous. There's a pub about half a mile away.
I remember it. I used to drink in there on the way to gigs, actually. Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. I think it was quite dangerous for punk rockers to go wandering about Wapping.
But yeah, just to put it in the context for people who've got no idea about this, Wapping was Docklands, wasn't it? But not Docklands in the way we understand them now, having been gentrified, but it was a load of old warehouses, darkly lit streets. It just looked like a scene from a Jack the Ripper film or something, really. Very deserted as well.
It was a bitter cold winter as well. Snow, a lot of time it was snow, so even more dangerous and forbidding. Remember the tube station had a lift, remember that?
I do remember.
It was a weird
lift. Yeah. It was a whole weird little line.
It wasn't even a proper line, was it? Yeah.
No, it was like
change somewhere.
Ghost line or something.
Yeah.
It wasn't used like all the other London tube lines. It was nor was that whole area of London. That whole area of London was just gone, wasn't it? Which is, I guess, how the developers saw the potential. But
well, this is probably why the Anarchy Centre could be there, why Big A Little A could be there.
Yes, of course.
So there's a reason for that. But then, because the drink was difficult to get, we decided we would bring the drink. What we'll do, we'll buy loads of drink and bring it and sell it. Not for profit, but so there's drink at the place, because you can't have a gig without drink. And then Brett started making food. Brett would make these huge curries and Puppy Mansions too. We'd lug them bags and bags of these curries all the way to Wapping, lay them out on the table. We've got a back room. Then some guy helped us, and he said he'll bring the alcohol. He's got a car. A punk who drove a car, a miracle. But he'd buy the alcohol from his local supermarket, bring it over, masses of it, and we'd pay him for it, pay him back. And so I'm saying it's called, I think it was called Skunk or something. He had a leather armadillo. He had a jacket. He had a jacket with lots and lots of studs on the back.
Wow, that doesn't really narrow it down much, does it? Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll fit him into the picture, but he started big, so he would bring the alcohol, and we'd bring the food, and we sort of got into it that way. I remember on my trip around Europe, in Italy, I'd got loads of anarchy posters, really big anarchy, because I did all the anarchy. Even Berlin, most of the places I'd gone to, I'd met up with anarchists and anarcho-punks, or whatever you want to call them. And I brought back all these posters, and I put them up. I put them up in the Anarchy Centre, and they all got pinched. I think by the anarchists. I blame the anarchists.
Well, you pinched him in the first place, didn't you?
No, I was giving them back. Literally.
Okay, fair enough.
The syndicalist collectors. You must have this picture. I don't think there's actually a picture of us at the bar. I mean, that's doing the alcohol. And there's a giant picture behind us, an Italian anarchist picture. And I remember seeing that picture, thinking, that's not there anymore. It's gone, the bastards. But I think the real anarchists pinched him.
Okay, all right, yeah.
bastards.
Did
But
you have much to do with the real anarchists?
um, I don't know what. Yeah, real. For me, it's really like with Malcolm or Penny or the Anarchy Centre.
No, I'm talking Ronan Bennett, Iris Mills, and that
No,
crowd.
no, never had a meeting with them at all. Never had any understanding of that. It wasn't part of the lifestyle we were living. It's what was it? And Lee was big into, say, Durruti and Bakunin and that stuff. He used to try and teach us about
Mm.
anarchy, proper anarchy. But forget it, mate. Do they owe us a living?
One thing I'm quite interested in, because you're perhaps the only person, certainly one of the few people to be able to do this, would be comparing the Roxy to Wapping Anarchy Centre.
The Roxy was sexier, a lot sexier. And more practical because it's meant to be a gig venue. They had a stage, whereas the Anarchy Centre was a room that was cobbled together. There, a stage in the corner of the room. Younger, I'll say the Anarchy Centre was younger. Younger, I could say friendlier because those who went there knew that it was there. When the Roxy was, even when the Roxy was started, it was a kind of these Johnny Rottens people were known. They were figures, Susie Sue and stuff. They were known as people. There's also media, a lot of media there, whereas the Anarchy Centre, no media. The only people there were either people in the bands, friends of the bands, or somehow found out about it. But I was to say grim. I don't know if both are grim or both are great. I don't know. Hard to say. Depends on your feeling. I had great times at both.
What about the
And
music?
better at the Roxy. Better at the Roxy. Again, the bands were established. You had Slaughter and the Dogs, Eater, Generation X, Susie, Wayne County, Adamant, ATV. I think the Police. I saw the Police at the bloody Roxy.
You
Even
didn't
they
see
were.
the police. Didn't see many police at Wapping Anarchy Centre.
No,
That's a play on words. It's pretty rubbish.
I do remember once they turned up and they were saying, "Don't go out." They came and said all this rumors of a big right wing skinhead gang trying to find the place,
Okay.
and they said, "Stay in." Who came in? Said, "Everyone stay in here. Don't go out." There you
Hmm.
go. But no, don't stand so close to me. No, I think you should say the next stage is jump on from that. The Anarchy Centre closed down completely, not because of the music, but closed down because they couldn't pay the rent. And then it was the big shift in 82, it must be 82, 80, 81, 81. So these dates seem like ridiculous.
Mm.
When it moved to the Spanish Anarchy Centre, Centro Iberico. And this is when we really got involved. And we were taking the food demos, taking the food and the drink to the
Yeah.
other place. And now it became Andy Martin, so we're still putting bands on. And we started Puppies. I'm trying to think about if we'd done number 4 at this point. Maybe we hadn't. Maybe we hadn't. There's a gap between 3 and 4 because I think we were too busy doing Anarchy than writing about it. And I think we went to so we sort of took on every second night. Andy Martin was putting gigs on, started putting bands on there. And it was now nothing to do with Persons Unknown. This is Centro Iberico and Andy Martin.
Spanish
Yeah,
anarchy, essentially, from the
Spanish Anarchy.
refugees from the Civil War, essentially. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right, yeah. So so we'd now broken away completely from the original concept of the Anarchy Centre. It was now a Spanish building. It's an old school. It's an old school in West 10. Yeah, and then Andrew's putting gigs on upstairs. Upstairs. At that point, it's upstairs. And then we moved downstairs. After a while, we took over to the extent we were going to have gigs downstairs. And there may be some argument with David Allen of Gong one evening.
I was there when he played.
You were there. He
Yeah.
played upstairs, and we all sat downstairs.
I remember seeing him. I don't remember any detail.
I don't think we. boycotted his gig upstairs in
Did you?
disgust.
I I just remember him doing this song, or I don't know if you call it a song or a performance piece or something, where he was basically offering himself at an auction, and the crowd had to shout out prices or something like
Oh
that.
my god.
I've probably got that a bit wrong, but I didn't realise it was even a performance piece. I thought he'd just lost his rag a bit. Or something. Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
Maybe he was shaken by us downstairs, but that double booking that was a catalyst. I think Andy Martin had set up the gig
right.
and not bother telling anyone, like David Allen or the people running it. Other people were just putting gigs on as well there. And we were sitting downstairs, and I think we said, why not have our gigs here on the ground floor? And so we built a stage. And there's no electricity in that room. We go through the main front doors of the school, that whole ground floor, there's no electricity. So we got one of our punk, Wolfin, was an electrician. And he went to this giant room full of electricity and managed to run electricity from there on a wire all the way through to the room. And how does that happen? How does a punk rocker be able to do that? And certainly the anarchists are baffled that we managed to do this. They thought we were never going to. Oh yeah, you can have that room. You're never going to do it. So maybe we had this wire running through and cobbled together a sort of big extension box with like 5 or 6 plugs on it, and then we built the stage out of old cookers and whatever was lying around, and that was it. Suddenly we had I think they said you can have that room, and they thought we put the stage at the back of the room, but we put it on the side, so it moved in. So you actually had, the place, you had 2 rooms together because it spilled out into the second room, but there's no doorways, just an arch. And they were baffled. I remember the Spanish council saying, "You put the stage in the wrong place." In the wrong places. No, just you wait. On the first time, it looked perfect, and everyone's like, "Oh, why is it there?" So I think at that point, Andy Martin had stopped putting gigs on, or the David Allen fiasco meant he was kind of less inclined to bother doing. Oh gosh, couldn't be bothered. So we started putting. Then we put on Blood and Roses, and You're Muted.
I was going to say things are changing a bit musically at this point because there's not a real great deal of stuff of musical memory going on at Wapping Anarchy Centre, I don't believe, no matter what people might say. But when it comes to Central Iberica, you've got bands who are like really quite interesting popping up, haven't you? Blood and Roses, Sex Gang Children played there, and
The
and
Mob, the Mob as well. I think the
Mob,
first time
yeah,
here, who
yeah,
just moved to London.
things that aren't so 3 chord thrashy, I suppose, and things that I guess end up being called positive punk and then are almost precursors to goth, I would
Oh
suggest.
yeah, this is all happening there. This is it. The Sex Gang Children played there as well.
Yeah.
UKDK. So it's moved. Yeah, I think Andy Martin liked all that Subhumans and the anabolic steroids.
Yeah, all that crap.
The kind of thrash, the anarcho,
Behave
pure
yourself.
anarcho.
But yeah, go.
And then
Yeah.
so we where the Bob was putting together Blood and Roses out in Stoke Newington, and you sort of well, I'm thinking how he cropped back into our life, because obviously that's a huge input, and Blood and Roses became one of the best bands. I think Fowler's, he was playing somewhere in Clissold Park, a gig in Clissold Park with the very first Blood and Roses, and Fowler's found out about it and gone, and that connected us, and then he sort of got back, and it became a proper band.
Oh.
A Mob, I remember Mob, the Mob played Fuck Off Records gig in Gospel Oak in Hampstead Heath, and we'd gone to see the main band King Trigger were headlining. It was a free gig in the park. King Trigger were headlining. They'd had the single River. We went, and the Mob were on the bill, and knocked out by the Mob, stunned by the Mob. And then we said to the Mob, "You just come play the Anarchy Centre." And so they moved into London, just moved down. And so
They didn't know anyone and you didn't know them and
no, they knew their hippie crowd from
yeah.
Dorset, Somerset, and that's how they finished up where they were staying was kind of another squatted street, like a compulsory purchase street in Hackney,
It's Brown Road.
in Brown Road. Yeah, I think they had the bus, the convoy took over an abandoned bus garage, I think, nearby. And I wonder whether, and Genesis, our friend Genesis, is living on Bush Road, just around the corner as well. It's all everything connects. Everything connects. But Genesis never played. Genesis, I think, probably still played the Central America, but not through us.
That was before, I think, wasn't it? Before.
Yeah, but they were there. They left their prints, their fingerprints are on the place, and stickers, of course.
Of course.
But yeah, so that's me saying we put Anarchy into action. That became a big thing for us. Every week we start picking on these bands and setting it up, taking money at the door, paying the bands, paying to pay. But that we became organisers. The Puppy Collective became known as the organisers of the place. And I started doing the leaflets and everything, and that really took up most of that summer. I think most of that summer was taken up with the Anarchy Centre.
So, in terms of spirit, to return to that,
Mm.
how did you feel it was going at this point? Because there's a shift in part one. We talked about spirit very much in terms of what you might call, well, I was going to say leaders or gurus or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and neither of those words sit very comfortably. But there were some very inspirational figures about as we talked about.
Mm.
This is this phase is a little bit more a little bit more decentralized, I suppose. You know, everybody's doing their bit, a bit more kind of collectivized, a bit more like your traditional left wing organizations rather than your kind of hierarchies, I suppose.
Mm.
So how did that feel? Did that feel better? Did it feel pros and cons, swings and roundabouts, or worse, or what?
I think more extremes because you're more responsible. This whole anarchy thing, being responsible for yourself, actually, what that actually means, quite scary because you can't. There's no one telling you what to do. No one support. There's no support net, no safety net, and no orders. And so, if it goes wrong, it's up to you. Or I'm also wondering. And Penny would be the only person left, if you like, as the leader. Malcolm wasn't there. Genesis wasn't there. But even then, Penny, Crass weren't really around. They never played the Anarchy Centre. They never came down to it. I think quite scary. It may have been me.
Yeah, I remember it was your handwriting on a leaflet about Central America. I think that was my first knowledge of it,
Right.
and I recognised your handwriting from Puppy, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I quite warmed to it because of that, of course, and because of the tone, the vibe of it as well seemed markedly different to all the sanctimony of Wapping, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say personally, I sort of warmed to it a lot more then, and I did think of it as more of a kind of puppy friendly place, I suppose. Although you'd been a noticeable and indeed one of the more positive parts of Wapping as well. So yeah, I guess you were kind of the movers and shakers in Central America.
You say you couldn't see the leader, it's you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, it's the poker thing, isn't it? If you sit at a poker table and you can't see who's the mug, it's you.
Yeah, that's the mirror. Yeah.
So that's that aspect of it. And it was an incredible time. It's hard to put into words, and there's no real written information about it. Because now you play a Rudimentary Peni album, and you think, oh, that was it. No, it wasn't that. It was a feeling. There's a vibe about it. I think how we shift then, that spirit, that was full flow, if you like. That was full flame. We were doing it. We were doing it for ourselves. We had broken free, but it was an alternative life. It could be done. And I think now what happened next? I remember having a discussion with Andy Martin in his room, in his house, because he was showing me these flyers and things for the apostles. So when the apostles had started, or he was just about to start them, and he was going on about badges. And I'm going to do these badges. We're going to do this fanzine. And I remember saying to him, forget your badges. We don't need no stinking badges. So I was saying, what we need is housing and food. What we should be looking for is housing and food. People, not badges and fanzines. We've done that. We're moving on. I remember Hagar the Woman rehearsing at the same time. Hagar the Woman just started, and they were rehearsing in there, and they were thinking, "Well, we want badges." Let's see them in Ruth's mind. Oh, I want badges.
Yeah.
But that, to me, that was a huge stepping point for me, jumping point onwards. Is housing. Saying that to somebody, having a discussion about Centro Iberico, and saying, "No, we want to move on," and we did. And the fact that we were taking food there, Brett was making us food and taking it, still did that to Centro Iberico. So we were feeding people. Then housing came when they set up Black Sheep Housing Co-op. Black Sheep Housing Co-op. This was kind of happening around here. And there's a Puppy 4 came out, which was printed by Big A Little A. And I remember we did 1,000, just do 1,000. I don't want to do any more than that. Just get, selling them is too much of a chore. I remember we sold almost all of them at Days of Future Past and Leeds. Went up there, and Lugworm, Mick Quealy. So he got the idea. I said, "I'll give them to you. They're 25p for sale. I'll sell them to you for 20p. So you take as many as you like and come back and give me 20p and keep all the 5p's." And he sold about 3. He went mad. He went mad on that.
Lugworm is a completely unsung hero of all of that time, I would say. And it's a shame
Oh yeah.
because he really was an energy, a force of nature, I think, in all the stuff that he did. And rather like Alistair Livingston, there's people who should be celebrated more in that sense. I think Mick Lugworm is one of them. Personally.
Yeah, yeah. I seen he formed the Turd Burglars.
Well, it wasn't really that bit of thing.
To celebrate the Turd
He did
Burglars
that
Day.
too. Yeah, yeah. It's a great name. It must perhaps the best name out of all the punk bands.
He was the instigator of Black Sheep. Like him and Alistair really did all the hard work, all the legal stuff.
Mm.
And that went next to Puppy Mansions too. I remember Val was going to kind of cut that short. That Val moved in there into the first Black Sheep. They got 3 properties, I think, off Islington. And the front page of the Evening Standard was Punk's Paradise, shock horror.
Seen it, yes. Yeah.
And there's, I think, Brett's Bob's in there. Bob's in that picture on the cover. But Val moved off. Val moved out of Puppy Mansions, and I was again. I'm seeing a picture now of the pub. Me not one, or I left the pub voluntarily, but St James Street, saying I'm not going to go to the fire station and finish up there, and they're not going to go to the hospital and finish up there. This time I was at Puppy Mansions too. I was quite happy. I was quite happy there, and they said, "No, I'm not going to go there. This punk thing, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work." Within 2 months, I was there. I'd moved in with them, so that then that's the housing. I mean, it's astounding that we've got houses out of Islington that punk rockers could do this. How the spirit works. And then from that, the Mob moved in, and the Mob album had been out by that point. The Mob starting up,
and all the Madmen records was, I presume, kind of run out of that place, really.
It was, yeah. I remember seeing one.
Livingston, yeah.
Alistair was running that one, really, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the front room doing Witch Hunt, putting singles into the sleeves of Witch Hunt. There were piles of singles and piles of sleeves, and we all had to sit there and put them into sleeves. And so yes, that's kind of how it moved on. I'm not sure what happened to Centro Iberico, whether that was closed down. I think it was closed down, wasn't it? It was evicted. So there was a reason why we stopped going there. Because people have asked me that, when did it stop? And I really can't remember the end of that. But then you say then the next big thing was the Black Sheep. It's like they say the spirit was moving on. Though again, it was outside my territory. I was not part of the Black Sheep setup. But then I did, when I moved in there, I became, a leading light of it.
I always thought you were instrumental or part of, the gang that set it up.
I know, it's funny. I was the miserable, grumpy old man. I was Johnny Rotten. Rubbish. Wasting your time.
At least you didn't have a Make America Great hat on, I suppose. But...
No. Stay in Kilburn. Make Kilburn great again.
There's some hats, which I think is fantastic. Make Peckham shit again, which I think is.
Oh,
Uh, um, okay, so what happens next then? This is the point at which my kind of knowledge of what to ask you about, in a way, tapers off, because this is where it all sort of goes a bit quiet. If I'm
oh, what happens now from the Black Sheep Cob at Grosvenor Avenue, 103 Grosvenor Avenue, is I marks in there, Fod, Sarah. Fod and Sarah are big into the psychic. I'm thinking about the psychic TV beginnings and the shaving the head and having a little ponytail at the
oh
back, the
God,
Hare Krishna thing. That was happening, and the traveling, because Mark was still very much into the Stonehenge, was where Stonehenge and all the traveling started. Because Mark was very much his roots in that.
the mob were getting massive.
Mob were getting massive. That album was released from there. I remember that because I wrote the review whilst living there, the review for the NME.
Yeah,
But then by the time it was published, Val and Mark had moved out of Black Sheep. Or had they moved in? They were living in New North Road. Living in New North Road squat. So this is like how it all fits together. No, they Black Sheep hadn't started at that point. I remember the piece. I remember when I wrote it, I had a photo of Mark. He looked like Kurt Cobain. Phenomenal photo that someone had given me of Mark. And Joseph was driving the Force Dove pictures of the band. I was going to write the review for the NME. And there's this whole drive, no pictures of the band, no superstars and all this. I remember it took me 3 goes to get it in. Alan Spencer, Neil Spencer, the NME, rejected my writing, and I sat in his office, and he told me how to write it. And I had to take the copy of No Doves Fly Here with me, and played that in his room, his office, to say why it's important to have a big mob piece, a big mob review. And he showed me something, write it like this, write it like that, take that bit, put that at the beginning, do this, that, the other. So he really wanted it in. Then he's saying, have you got any pictures? I've got this fucking beautiful picture, this great picture. But Joseph is really driving this thing, don't want it. Curtis didn't care. And Mark was kind of going along with the no superstar thing. Though I can see later on he changed his mind. I told the story to Mark 4 years ago about the picture. He said, "Why didn't you just use it? Fuck Joseph." I said, "I'd blame it on you." I said, anyway, so if only you told me that then, because that review went in the NME, big half-page review, and they had a drawing. Someone put a drawing in instead of a picture, like Punk is dead or something, Punk's not dead or something. And Mark's told me that he went to Rough Trade, who were distributing it, and so they're outselling the Smiths. After that review, they started outselling the Smiths, who Rough Trade had put out, had released. And they were very interested in doing it, more mob. They wanted mob. And I think if that picture had gone in, you'd been way, that picture of Mark looking like Kurt Cobain, it would have gone way beyond the Smiths. It'd be bigger than U2.
Is this the picture that was on the front cover of Punk Lives, with he's squatting down?
No, it's even better than that.
Okay.
It's from Somerset days, so he's still a bit more fresh-faced.
Yeah.
But
I
he had
think,
that same sort of dreadlocky look. And the Punk Lives thing, Joseph was furious, but by that point, fuck you, Joseph. As the Punk Lives, another whole saga, wasn't it?
wow, yeah. What absolutely blew my mind was the mob really were getting big, and there was no apparent ceiling. There was always a massive ceiling on most anarcho punk bands, Crass included, that they could go so far but no further, and it was the further bit was the only bit was going to be effectual, I would say. The mob didn't seem to have that. The mob seemed to be the kind of band that could have appealed across different genres. They could have appealed to goths. They could have appealed to, people who weren't kind of like sold on anarcho punk.
Yeah, so there would be Nirvana. I think there's a big
Yeah,
parallel. Nirvana broke out the grunge scene.
Yeah,
And
rather like Kurt Cobain, I suppose, in a strange kind of way, Mark seemed deeply unimpressed by all this, and just threw it all in to toddle off and be a new age traveller, which is
Yeah,
quite an astonishingly unusual set of values, set of priorities, I think. And
yeah,
you know, you were living with Mark at the time
yeah. He
in
was
this,
living at Grosvenor. Yeah,
yeah, in this shared house. I mean, do you have any insights on that?
but I think they did Witch Hunt, didn't they? That's the only thing they did after the album.
No,
And
that was
then
before the album.
was that before the album?
Yeah, man. Yeah,
All right. See, this gets confusing now about the timing of all this. Because it's on the album. Yeah, not Witch Hunt. Sorry, Mirror Breaks.
it is Mirror Breaks. Yes,
Mirror Breaks. That's the one we were doing the sleeves for, and that was after the album.
I did wonder, but I didn't want to stop you. Yeah.
Sorry, I think you should have picked me up on that.
Well, you know, I'm not here to argue, but yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, the Mirror Breaks was the last one they did. He has told me since. He's told me since that it just dried up. So he had this great big rush for 18 months. He wrote all the lyrics, all the songs,
Right.
all those incredible lyrics. It's just poured out, and then it just stops. And so the Mirror Breaks that's actually from Somerset days. He wrote nothing in London, and so him going traveling. They said well, it's good because now he does this. When he does the comeback gigs, that's all they've got anyway. They haven't got new stuff to play. They don't try and play the new album. They've only got one bunch of songs, and it fits in a set.
Yeah, I think it's very. It reminds me of the Levelers, who's a band I'm, was quite friendly with, and so on. In the sense that they've done loads and loads of albums since they were great, but they've always had the good sense to just only play one or two when they go on
Oh,
tour. They know what the audience is there for, quite frankly,
yeah,
I suppose. But yeah, I was enormously. I was going to say I was enormously impressed, but that would probably be sugaring my own attitude because I was just confused mainly. I was thinking you're on the verge of all this greatness
yeah,
and you walk away.
yeah,
And that's quite an astonishing thing to do.
yeah.
So anyway, yeah, sorry, back to your story.
No, I think there was a bit Joseph. We had that pressure of Joseph wanted to have his songs in it, which went on to be Blythe Power.
Yes.
So there was a kind of pressure, and Mark said didn't want to sing Joseph's lyrics. And
Well,
so
they are very different in tone, aren't they? I
oh
suppose.
yeah, yeah. So there's that kind of conflict. So he couldn't have any ideas, and Joseph was becoming all these ideas. And he said, I'm not doing that. I can't do those songs. So that there was in that sense, there was a split. There was had to go. Something had to happen. Otherwise, the second album would have been Joseph, would have been Blythe Power.
Yeah, there's a logic there. Yeah, yeah. And Blythe Power were not the Mob, essentially. Completely different feeling, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So it's better to go off and start a new band, start afresh.
Yeah, yeah.
But that traveling to go, that Mark brought that kind of ethos to Black Sheep Housing Co-op and going to Stonehenge and everything, and that became more interesting than staying in London. So a lot of people were going off traveling backwards and forwards. I was thinking about the psychic TV thing was kicking in as well. At that point, we had in the house Sarah and Ford, who were hugely into that. Ford had come from the squatting days with Bob at Stoke Newington. So he was bringing the Bob influence in the Crowley side of Genesis and psychic TV was being well obvious in the house. Mark had no interest in all that side, all that stuff.
Can you
And that
explain that a bit? Because I sort of share that with Mark, really. So,
uh,
what's the psychic TV influence?
what psychic TV influence? Um, I think how they had the Temple of Psychic Youth. The first album they put out as Psychic Youth. I think it's a bit like a Crash thing, isn't it, or Markham thing? It's like a package. Here's a whole image, a whole symbolism, and people who are hearing about the occult and everything, which was to say was still around. That was something to put it into, something to hang the occult onto, and it's hard now. I think back to that album. I haven't played it for maybe 30 years, so I can't think of what tracks are on it, but there were some that were very good, very good. And Alex Ferguson says he played on it now. He's now saying he played on this early stuff, which would give it that sensibility, pop sensibility, which Genesis also never had in Throbbing Gristle. Uh, so it's just a very attractive package, occult, mysterious, sexy. And it took off. I think this is maybe I liked it because I thought this is something for the occult, as that's getting a bit wishy-washy, lost. So it gave me a focus for that as well. I'm not selling this to you at all, am I?
Oh, it's a bit late for that, but but I'm just quite curious
Yeah,
as to finding out,
yeah.
you know,
I think
what it was that I wasn't into.
no, he also started playing at squat gigs, psychic TV. They started playing anarcho squat gigs
Yeah,
with bands like the Subhumans and stuff. So he tapped into that crowd, and he was living in Hackney near Brown Road, uh,
yeah.
and
There was probably a cultural Venn diagram going on, I guess, in that respect.
yeah, yeah. And the fact that I knew Alex and Jen from the old days, I said I would have a bigger ear for him than if it was unknown.
Sure.
But yeah, it was quite phenomenal. It's such a big, from just throwing gristle, grinding away for years and no one really caring, to suddenly this is huge. This suddenly went really big, and big in the small circles. Never
Mm,
went mainstream.
no. And you were writing for NME at this point as well, of course, weren't you? So this is also quite interesting because NME obviously is very mainstream.
Hmm.
Um, you did the first review of my band, and I remember that, and I remember the second review of my band was in Sounds, and it was a really different feeling, as I've said at some points in
Was
somewhere.
that the anabolics or flowers?
No, this is Flowers in the Dustbin, and you wrote a review, and that was great. And this stranger wrote a review, and that was really different because I thought, well, Tony's a fifth columnist. Tony's on our side, regardless of the music. I mean, um, which is a massive projection and presumption on my part.
Mm.
Were you a fifth columnist, or were
Yeah,
you sort of giving it a go at the NME?
it was fifth columnist and income, income because there wasn't any puppies at the time. I don't think I had gone from Sounds. I was working for Sounds first of all. I did some stuff for Record Mirror. Then in Sounds, I wrote a review of some of the Addicts, and they hadn't printed it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so I sent it to the NME, and they printed it that week. And the next time I went back into Sounds, a different name. I submitted it anonymously with a different name. They printed it. I went to Sounds, and Gary Bushell shot me up. He said, "Oh yeah, he's what have you?" He told the reviews editor that Addicts. He'd read it, and he was hanging around Sounds all the time, and he'd read my review in Sounds, and then so when he saw it in the NME, he knew it was the same review.
Okay.
And so he told me off. He told the review person, said, "Why have you done that?" I said, "We were going to print it." I said, "We didn't for 3 weeks. I came in to tell you, but you weren't here." And I said, "I want it printed. If you're not going to print it, they are." They said, "Well, fuck off, and fuck you."
Right,
So we
okay.
had a bit of a argy-bargy. But at one point, no, I think it was separate. Yeah, I was writing for Zigzag and Punk Lives, of course, at the same time as well. And I think at one point I was writing for 5 magazines at the same time under 5 different names.
How come you're not still doing that? Because years later, I worked at Sounds, and half, I don't know what any of the other people are up to really, but certainly some people have ended up at the Guardian, and some people haven't. Shall we?
Yeah,
Did you not have any eye? Did you not have an eye at all on doing that for a job?
I did, but then I got twisted up into the traveling, which took me to Stonehenge, where I saw people juggling and fire eating and unicycling, tightrope walking, and I had a light, but that's me. I thought I want to do that. And I remember back to when I was going around Europe and seeing people busking on the street with not guitars or anything complicated, but doing this fire eating and stuff. And I thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. It's that pure. I'm getting away from the enemy, getting away. I'm now just me and the audience. It's just me and the audience give me money in my hat, and that's it. There's no middleman, no nothing.
Where the spirit lives.
And that was the spirit. So the spirit found the spirit at Stonehenge, and that 73, 83, 84, but by 84, I was performing. So I'd given up writing completely, just knocked it on the head.
This
At
is
one point,
almost the duff moment, isn't it? But before we reach there, you did the final puppy issue, number 6,
yeah,
which was nothing to do with music at all. It was all about a quest of faith through a world of illusion. I
that's
remember.
the one. And that's Stonehenge. A lot of it's going to Stonehenge, isn't it? But going, it's very much me seeing the fire eaters and stuff. Though I based it on the Cramps and all that stuff. So I was hearing the Cramps play, and
Remember, you put loads of bands on the cover, and none of them were in it, which is brilliant.
well, they mentioned.
Well, yeah, if you want to stretch a point, but
Yeah,
yeah, but that was really kind of fascinating to me because this is in a way what I've used as the sort of base point narrative of this whole interview series. Really, is this quest for the spirit, a quest of faith through a
yeah, through
world
the
of
world.
illusion.
Yeah,
So I suppose there's a couple of questions about that. Really, you say it came from going to the Stonehenge Festival. Um, But it was there already, wasn't it? Really, the whole of the series of puppy fanzines to me has an undercurrent of this quest of faith, really, that isn't accepting anymore that you need to be a consumer of this from bands, but that you can go and do it yourself. Uh,
yeah, it's cultural commentary.
yeah,
They said at the end, that end was almost something that I didn't know at the time. I think I did do that issue just to sell at Stonehenge, um, and they were printed off. Some of the very first ones were red ink on gold paper, printed at a community print place off Holloway Road. I think me and Alistair did them together, printed them and stapled them, probably stapled them, and that was going to be it. That's just going to be a short thing for Stonehenge. And then, of course, you take them to Stonehenge in the darkness, you can't read red on gold. It's a way complete disaster.
no, right.
But then we got back and I said, let's print up some more, whether Alice's idea or my idea. And so we did that with the A3 paper. I can't remember where it was done because it's on A3 fold over. But somehow we did it and then had to sell the bloody things. Had to sell, but it was almost, yeah, it's almost a letter to myself. This is
Yes,
how far you've come. Also, yeah, again, say breaking open Kill Your Puppies hit the same wall as Ripped and Torn. It's not in tune with me anymore. You can say maybe that's what's happening each time. Ripped and Torn stopped. I went off to Covent Gardens and then fire stations, hospitals, all that experimentation. Westhampton Housing Co-op then was the place to start Kill Your Pet Puppy, do another magazine, and when that finished up at Anarchy Whopping Centre, then Anarchy Centre Iberico, then Black Sheep Housing Co-op, then there's nowhere to go. You know, it's like hit the wall there.
only there was somewhere to go because that was Stonehenge Festival.
Yeah,
So tell me about Stonehenge Festival.
Stonehenge Festival at that time. Do you want to carry on now? How long are you going to carry on for?
I don't know. I presume actually you saying that means let's leave it till next time.
No, I'm just thinking because it's almost like the next saga
Yeah. Okay. You
is
think
that
that's a
is
good place to end part 2? Yeah.
yeah. I think so. That
All right.
Cute Puppy ended on that, and
Keep them wanting more, as they always say. Okay. Yeah. So next time then we'll start off with Stonehenge Festival.
yeah, because I think that is, as you say, with Mark and Mob, and that sort of getting away from his performing, my writing. We all sort of stopped what we were doing. And again, it's a lifestyle thing, wasn't it? Going to do that lifestyle, going under the radar. And then he didn't go abroad. You know, when I went abroad with Cravat and toured, and then when I came back and I became a professional performer, which again I didn't expect to happen.
Which is another story.
So that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's that story, yeah.
Yeah.
And so
So,
all that kind of the germ for that is Stonehenge, is the Stonehenge Festival.
okay.
Oh, people
Well,
go there for the bands. I went there, so I saw that stuff and never expect. Here's the thing: you just never expect.
brilliant. Okay. Let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time once again, Tony.
So it's an
Um,
epic, yeah.
it's an epic, yes, absolutely. That's a good way of putting it, and a fascinating story. So, for the benefit of those who are seeing this as a one-off, as opposed to us recording it not like that, I would like to thank you so much for your time and for an absolutely fascinating look back at stuff. I'm really hoping that stuff like this becomes kind of, you know, a contributor to the historical remembrance of those times, because it's really quite important that these kind of viewpoints, I think, get remembered. So thank you so much for that, Tony. And I'll stop recording, but I'll chat to you afterwards. But
Thank you.
great.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.